The snow had turned her feet numb 3 days ago, but Theresa Lawson kept walking because stopping meant her brother would find her. And if he found her, she knew she would never leave Montana alive. She had stolen his horse in the dead of night, riding hard through the first blizzard until the animal went lame near the Wyoming border. After that, she walked. The year was 1882, and winter in the Northern Territories showed no mercy to anyone, least of all a 22-year-old woman fleeing the only family she had left. Her brother Marcus had always been cruel, but after their parents died and left him the ranch, his cruelty had transformed into something darker, something possessive and violent that made her skin crawl whenever he looked at her. The final straw came when he announced to the ranch hands that no man would ever have her, that she belonged to the family land to him, in ways that made her stomach turn. So she ran. The leather satchel across her shoulder held everything she owned now. A change of clothes, her mother's Bible, $43 she had saved over 2 years, and a small pistol she barely knew how to use. Her dark hair, once neatly braided, hung in frozen tangles around her face. Her lips were cracked and bleeding. Her fingers had lost feeling on the second day. But Theresa walked because the alternative was unthinkable. On the 7th day, as the sun climbed weak and pale over the snow-covered plains of northern Wyoming, her legs finally gave out. She collapsed in a drift beside what might have been a road, though the snow made it impossible to tell. Her vision blurred. She thought about praying but could not remember the words. Instead, she closed her eyes and wondered if freezing to death hurt as much as people said. The sound of hooves cutting through snow pulled her back from the edge of unconsciousness. She tried to lift her head but managed only to turn it slightly. Through the white haze, she saw a dark figure on horseback, leading a pack mule. The rider stopped. Heavy boots crunched through the snow toward her. Strong hands rolled her onto her back. She looked up into a weathered face, dark eyes filled with concern beneath the brim of a worn hat. "Jesus Christ," the man muttered. "How long have you been out here?" Theresa tried to answer, but her jaw would not work properly. The man did not wait for a response. He lifted her as easily as if she weighed nothing, carrying her to his horse. He wrapped her in a thick wool blanket from his pack and secured her in front of his saddle, keeping one arm around her waist to hold her upright. "Got a cabin about 3 miles east," he said, more to himself than to her. "Stay awake if you can. Talk to me. What's your name?" Theresa, she managed through chattering teeth. "I'm Harrison Porter. You're going to be all right, Theresa, I promise you that." She wanted to tell him about Marcus, about the danger, about how she needed to keep moving, but the words would not come. Instead, she let herself lean back against his solid chest as the horse began moving. Harrison kept talking to her, asking her questions she could barely process, telling her about his cabin, about the stew he had made yesterday that he would warm up for her. His voice was deep and steady, and she clung to it like a lifeline. The cabin appeared through the snow like a miracle. Small but sturdy, with smoke rising from a stone chimney. Harrison dismounted carefully, lifting Theresa down with him. He kicked open the door and carried her inside to a world of blessed warmth. A fire crackled in the hearth. He set her in a chair close to it and immediately began working on her boots. "This is going to hurt," he warned before pulling off the first one. She bit back a scream as feeling began returning to her feet. Harrison examined them with gentle efficiency, his calloused hands surprisingly tender. He looked up at her with those dark eyes and she saw relief there. "No frostbite that I can see. You got lucky. Damn lucky." He pulled off the second boot and her frozen stockings. "When did you last eat?" Theresa had to think about it. "Day before yesterday, some jerky." Harrison stood and moved to the stove. ladling stew from a pot into a wooden bowl. He brought it to her along with a spoon, but when her hands shook too violently to hold it, he pulled up another chair and began feeding her himself, slow and patient, waiting between bites. The stew was the most delicious thing she had ever tasted. Venison and potatoes and carrots in a rich broth that seemed to spread warmth through her entire body. After half the bowl, she started crying. Not from pain or fear, but from the overwhelming relief of being alive, of being warm, of being safe, at least for now. "Easy now," Harrison said softly. "You're all right. You're safe here." "You don't understand," Theresa whispered. "My brother, he'll be looking for me." Harrison set down the bowl and studied her face. She saw something harden in his expression. "He hurt you," he wanted to. She met his eyes. "He would have. That's why I ran." Harrison nodded slowly. "Then he won't find you here, and if he does, he'll have to go through me." The way he said it, quiet and certain, made her believe him. Over the next 2 days, Theresa slowly recovered in Harrison's cabin. He gave her his bed while he slept on a pile of furs near the fire. He made her eat regularly, brought her hot water to wash with, and never asked questions she was not ready to answer. She learned that he was 26, that he had come west from Ohio 5 years ago after his father died, that he worked as a ranch hand during the warmer months and trapped in the winter. The cabin belonged to him, built with his own hands over the course of a summer. She also learned that he was kind in a way she had not known men could be. He averted his eyes when helping her change into dry clothes. He never touched her unless necessary. He read aloud from a collection of newspapers he had saved, just to give her something to focus on besides her fear. On the 3rd day, she felt strong enough to sit at his small table while he cooked breakfast. She watched him move around the cabin with easy confidence, this man who had saved her life without hesitation, who asked for nothing in return. "Why did you help me?" she asked suddenly. Harrison looked over from the stove where he was frying eggs. "What kind of question is that?" Most men would have kept riding. "Then most men are cowards." He slid eggs onto 2 tin plates and brought them to the table, sitting across from her. "My mother used to say that character is what you do when nobody's watching. Out here, nobody's watching most of the time. That means your character is all you got." Theresa picked up her fork. "Your mother sounds like a wise woman." She was. Harrison's expression softened. "Died of fever when I was 15. That's when my father started drinking himself to death. Took him 7 more years to finish the job." He took a bite of eggs. "So I understand something about family that hurts you." They ate in comfortable silence. Outside, the snow had finally stopped falling. Through the cabin's single window, Theresa could see blue sky for the first time in over a week. "I need to keep moving," she said quietly. "I can't stay here and put you in danger." "Where will you go?" "I have some money. I thought maybe California." "Grass Valley, I heard there's work there for women. Teaching, maybe, or working in a shop." Harrison set down his fork and looked at her directly. "Grass Valley is over 800 miles from here, most of it through rough country. You planning to walk the whole way?" "If I have to." "In the middle of winter?" "I don't have a choice. There's always a choice." Harrison stood and walked to the window, his back to her. "The ranch I work for, the Double R, is about 40 miles south of here. Owner's name is Robert Richardson. Good man. He's got a big spread, needs help even in winter. I was planning to head down there in a few days anyway. You could come with me. Work in the main house, maybe. Mrs. Richardson is always looking for help with the cooking and cleaning. It would give you a place to stay, money to save, until the spring thaw makes the journey to California safer." Theresa felt something tight in her chest loosen slightly. "Why would you do this? You don't even know me." Harrison turned back to face her. The morning light caught his features, strong and honest. "Maybe I'd like to, know you, I mean." He looked almost embarrassed. "If that's all right with you." She felt heat rise to her cheeks that had nothing to do with the fire. "I'd like that too." The next few days passed in a strange, suspended peace. Harrison taught her how to properly shoot the pistol she carried, setting up targets in the snow outside the cabin. He was patient with her inexperience, standing close to adjust her stance, his hands steadying hers. She found herself hyper-aware of his presence, the warmth of him, the smell of leather and wood smoke that clung to his clothes. They talked for hours in the evenings, sitting by the fire. Harrison told her about his dreams of owning his own ranch someday, of raising good horses. Theresa told him about her childhood before her parents died, about her mother teaching her to read, about the books she had loved. She told him about Marcus too, how he had changed after the fever took their parents, how his grief had curdled into something toxic. "He used to be kind," she said one night, staring into the flames. "When we were children, he protected me. I don't know what happened to that person." "Sometimes grief breaks people in ways they can't come back from," Harrison said softly. "It's not your fault, I know. But I still feel guilty for running." "Don't. You did what you had to do to survive. That takes courage." She looked at him then, this man who had become so important to her in such a short time. "Thank you for everything, for saving my life." Harrison met her gaze, and something passed between them, electric and undeniable. "Theresa, he stopped, seeming to search for words. "I need you to know that when we get to the Double R, if you want to keep heading to California, I'll help you do that. Get you on a stage, make sure you have enough money, whatever you need. But if you wanted to stay, even just through the winter, I'd be glad of it." "Why?" she whispered. "Because somewhere between finding you half frozen in the snow and right now, I started hoping you might stay." He reached across the small space between them and took her hand. "Not because you have to, not because you owe me anything, but because maybe you want to." Theresa looked down at their joined hands, his rough and scarred, her still recovering from the cold. Her heart was pounding. "I think I might want to," she admitted. Harrison smiled, and it transformed his entire face. "Good. That's real good." They set out for the Double R on a clear, cold morning. Harrison saddled his horse, a steady bay gelding named Chief, and helped Theresa up behind him. She wrapped her arms around his waist, and he covered her hands with one of his briefly before taking up the reins. The 40-mile journey took 2 days with overnight stops at way stations. Harrison paid for separate rooms without her having to ask, and treated her with the same respectful courtesy that had characterized their time in the cabin. But there were moments, small and charged, when their eyes would meet across a table, or his hand would linger at her waist when helping her dismount, that made Theresa's breath catch. She was falling for him. She knew it with a certainty that should have frightened her, given everything she had just escaped. But Harrison was nothing like Marcus. Where her brother tried to cage and control, Harrison offered freedom and choice. Where Marcus dealt in threats and violence, Harrison offered kindness and protection. The difference was as stark as fire and ice. The Double R Ranch sprawled across a valley surrounded by low hills. Even in winter, with snow covering everything, Theresa could see it was prosperous. A large main house, multiple barns, bunkhouses, corrals. Cattle clustered near windbreaks, shaggy with their winter coats. Smoke rose from several chimneys. Harrison rode straight to the main house and helped Theresa down before tying Chief to the hitching post. Before they could knock, the door opened to reveal a woman in her late 40s with graying blonde hair and a warm smile. "Harrison Porter, as I live and breathe. Robert said you would probably freeze to death in that cabin of yours this winter. Good to see you too, Mrs. Richardson." Harrison smiled and stepped aside, putting his hand lightly on Theresa's back. This is Miss Theresa Lawson. She's looking for work, and I hoped you might have something in the house." Mrs. Richardson's sharp eyes took in Theresa's worn clothes and thin frame, but her smile never wavered. "Come inside, both of you. You must be frozen solid. Harrison, Robert's in the barn looking at a mare with colic. Why don't you go help him while I talk with Miss Lawson?" Harrison glanced at Theresa, a question in his eyes. She nodded slightly, and he squeezed her shoulder once before heading toward the barn. Inside, the main house was beautifully furnished but comfortable, not ostentatious. Mrs. Richardson led Theresa to a large kitchen with a wood-burning stove and a scrubbed pine table. She poured coffee from a pot and gestured for Theresa to sit. "Now then," Mrs. Richardson said, settling into a chair across from her. "Harrison's a good judge of character and he's never brought anyone here before, so why don't you tell me your story and we'll see what we can do." Theresa took a deep breath and told her. Not everything, but enough. About her brother's behavior, about running, about Harrison finding her. Mrs. Richardson listened without interrupting, her expression growing more sympathetic as the story unfolded. "That must have been terrifying," she said when Theresa finished. "You're very brave, my dear, and smart to get out when you did." She reached across the table and patted Theresa's hand. "We can always use help here. The ranch is big and I'm not getting any younger. If you're willing to work hard, I can offer you room and board, plus $20 a month. There's a small room off the kitchen that's currently used for storage, but we can clean it out. How does that sound?" $20 a month was more than Theresa had dared hope for. "It sounds wonderful." "Thank you, Mrs. Richardson. Call me Elizabeth, please. And you'll earn every penny, I promise you that. But you'll be safe here and you'll be treated with respect. Robert and I run a decent outfit. We don't tolerate any nonsense from the men." Elizabeth smiled. "Besides, something tells me Harrison will be around more often now. That boy's been alone too long." Theresa felt herself blush. "We've only known each other a week." "Sometimes that's all it takes." Elizabeth stood. "Come on, let me show you your room. We'll get it fixed up right away." The room was small but had a window and space for a bed, a dresser, and a small table. Theresa stood in the doorway and felt something she had not felt since her parents died. Hope. Over the following weeks, Theresa settled into life at the Double R. She worked hard, helping Elizabeth with cooking, cleaning, laundry, and mending. The work was demanding but satisfying, and Elizabeth proved to be patient and kind, teaching her things her mother had not lived long enough to show her. Robert Richardson was a big, weathered man in his early 50s who treated his ranch hands fairly and his wife with obvious devotion. He accepted Theresa's presence without question, trusting his wife's judgment. The ranch hands were polite and respectful, knowing Elizabeth would tolerate nothing less. Harrison became a regular presence at the ranch, far more regular than Elizabeth said he had been in previous winters. He found excuses to stop by the main house throughout the day. He brought Theresa a book he thought she might like. He taught her to play chess in the evenings. The two of them bent over a board at the kitchen table while Elizabeth knitted by the fire and smiled to herself. One evening in late February, after a particularly satisfying victory over him at chess, Theresa walked Harrison out to where Chief waited. The night was cold but clear, stars scattered thick across the black sky. "You let me win," she accused playfully. "I did not. You're getting good." Harrison grinned at her. "I'm going to have to start actually trying. You better." She hugged herself against the cold. "Harrison, I want to thank you again for bringing me here. Elizabeth and Robert have been so kind. I feel safe here." "Good." He stepped closer and her heart started racing. "Theresa, I need to tell you something." "What is it?" "That first day when I found you in the snow, I thought you were the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen, even half frozen." He reached up and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, his fingers lingering against her cheek. Every day since then, I've been falling harder for you. The way you laugh, the way you concentrate when you're reading, the way you're kind to everyone you meet. I know it hasn't been long, and I know you've been through hell. So if this isn't something you want, tell me now and I'll step back. But I had to tell you I care about you, Theresa, more than I've ever cared about anyone. Theresa looked up at him, at this good man who had saved her in every way a person could be saved. I care about you too, she whispered. So much it scares me sometimes. Why does it scare you? Because what if it's just gratitude? What if I only think I feel this way because you helped me? Harrison's thumb traced her cheekbone gently. Is that what you think? No, she leaned into his touch. No, it's more than that. It's so much more. I think about you constantly. I look forward to seeing you every day. When you're here, everything feels right. That's not just gratitude. No, Harrison agreed softly. It's not. He leaned down slowly, giving her time to pull away. She did not. When his lips met hers, gentle and questioning, she rose on her toes and kissed him back. It was nothing like the rough, grabbing kisses Marcus's ranch hands used to try to steal from her when her brother was not looking. This was tender and sweet, full of promise and possibility. When they pulled apart, both of them were smiling. I should go, Harrison said reluctantly, but I'll be back tomorrow. Maybe we could go for a ride if the weather holds. I'd like that. She watched him mount Chief and ride away into the darkness, one hand pressed to her lips, her heart singing behind her. Elizabeth's voice came soft and amused from the doorway. That young man is going to marry you, you know. Theresa turned, blushing furiously. Elizabeth, mark my words. Elizabeth came to stand beside her, both of them watching Harrison disappear down the road. Robert looked at me the same way Harrison looks at you. We were married within 6 months. It's too soon, Theresa protested weakly. Maybe, or maybe when you know, you know. Elizabeth put an arm around her shoulders. Come inside before you freeze. Again. As winter gradually loosened its grip and early spring began to emerge, Theresa and Harrison's relationship deepened. He courted her properly, with Elizabeth and Robert's blessing, taking her on rides through the surrounding hills, bringing her wildflowers, sitting with her on the porch in the evenings and talking about everything and nothing. They shared their first real argument in March, when Theresa received a letter forwarded from her old address. It was from Marcus, full of threats and demands that she return home immediately. Harrison wanted to ride north and confront him. Theresa refused to let him. He's dangerous, Harrison. He's not right in the head. All the more reason to make sure he knows you're protected. No. Theresa stood firm. Violence will only make this worse. I'm safe here. He doesn't know where I am. The letter went to the old homestead first, then through 2 other forwarding addresses. By the time it could be traced back here, if he even tried, months would have passed. I'm not letting him ruin what we have. Harrison paced the length of the porch like a caged animal. I hate that he hurt you. I hate that he's still out there thinking he has any claim to you. He has no claim to me. Theresa caught Harrison's hand and pulled him to a stop. You need to trust me on this, please. Harrison looked at their joined hands, then at her face. Slowly, the tension left his shoulders. All right. But if he shows up here, we'll deal with it together. But I don't think he will. She was right. As the weeks passed with no sign of Marcus, they both relaxed. Spring arrived in full, painting the valley green and filling it with the sounds of new calves and foals. The ranch came alive with activity, and Harrison took a full-time position with the Double R rather than returning to his cabin for the summer trapping season. On a warm evening in early May, Harrison asked Theresa to take a walk with him after dinner. They followed a creek that ran through the property, the setting sun turning everything gold. When they reached a spot where the water pooled clear and deep, Harrison stopped and turned to face her. "I've been thinking about what you said that night in my cabin, about heading to California." Theresa's heart sank. "Oh, let me finish." He took both her hands. "You said you wanted to go there to build a new life, to be somewhere safe where you could work and save money and maybe one day have something of your own." "Yes," she said quietly. "What if you could have that here?" "Harrison, I'm not following." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Theresa's breath stopped. "I've been saving for 5 years," Harrison said. "Every penny I didn't need for necessities went into a bank in Cheyenne. I've got almost $3,000 now. Enough to buy land, build a house, start a small herd." He opened the box to reveal a simple gold band with a small diamond. "I love you, Theresa. I want to build that life with you. Will you marry me?" Tears blurred her vision. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, Harrison, yes." He slipped the ring on her finger and kissed her, deep and passionate, and she kissed him back with all the love and hope in her heart. When they finally broke apart, both of them were crying and laughing at the same time. "I love you," she said. "I love you so much. I love you too. I'm going to spend the rest of my life making sure you never regret saying yes." They were married 3 weeks later in the double Artiques front parlor, with Elizabeth and Robert as witnesses, and the ranch hands crowding in to watch. Theresa wore a simple white dress that Elizabeth helped her sew, with wildflowers in her hair. Harrison wore his best clothes and looked at her like she was the answer to every prayer he had ever spoken. The circuit preacher pronounced them man and wife, and when Harrison kissed her, the ranch hands cheered. Elizabeth cried happy tears. Robert clapped Harrison on the back hard enough to make him stagger. They spent their wedding night in Harrison's cabin, which he had spent the previous week cleaning and preparing. He carried her over the threshold and set her down gently, his eyes searching hers. "Are you scared?" he asked softly. "A little," she admitted. "But not of you, never of you." "We'll go slow. We have all the time in the world." He was patient and gentle, and by the time dawn light crept through the window, Theresa knew she had made the right choice. This man, this life, this love, it was everything she had never dared dream of. They spent the summer building their future. With Robert's help, Harrison purchased 200 acres adjacent to the Double R. The land included good grazing, a year-round creek, and a stand of timber perfect for building. Harrison and several of the ranch hands spent long days constructing a house, while Theresa continued working for Elizabeth and planning their home. The house went up log by log, board by board. It was modest, just 4 rooms to start, but sturdy and well built. Harrison insisted on a large window in the main room, so Theresa would have good light for reading. She insisted on a covered porch, so they could sit outside on summer evenings. They moved in during late August, and Theresa spent happy days making it a home. She sewed curtains, planted a garden, learned to cook on the cast iron stove Harrison bought her. Elizabeth gave her seedlings and cuttings from her own plants. Robert helped Harrison build furniture. In September, on a crisp autumn morning, Theresa woke feeling nauseated. She made it outside just in time. Harrison found her sitting on the porch steps, pale and shaky. "Are you all right? Should I get the doctor?" "No." She looked up at him with a tremulous smile. "I think I'm pregnant." Harrison's face went through a dozen expressions in as many seconds. Shock, joy, fear, wonder. He sat down heavily beside her. "Are you sure?" "Not completely. But I'm 3 weeks late, and this is the 3rd morning I've been sick." She took his hand and placed it on her still flat stomach. "I think we're going to have a baby. A baby." Harrison said the words like they were magic. Then he was laughing and crying at the same time, pulling her into his arms. "We're having a baby." The doctor confirmed it 2 weeks later. Their child would arrive sometime in late April. Harrison became absurdly protective, trying to prevent Theresa from doing anything more strenuous than sitting in a chair. She had to firmly remind him that pregnant women had been doing chores for thousands of years, and she had no intention of being an invalid for 9 months. As her belly grew through the fall and winter, Theresa felt a contentment she had never imagined possible. Their little house was warm and cozy. They had enough money from Harrison's work and her savings to get through the winter comfortably. They had friends in the Richardsons and the ranch community. And most of all, they had each other. On a February afternoon, nearly a year after Harrison had found her in the snow, Theresa was hanging laundry when she heard horses approaching. She turned, expecting to see Harrison returning from mending fence. Instead, she saw 2 riders she did not recognize. Her blood ran cold as they drew closer and she recognized the taller man. Marcus. He dismounted slowly, his eyes fixed on her swollen belly. The other man stayed on his horse, hand resting on his gun. Marcus had aged in the past year, new lines around his eyes and mouth, his face harder. "Hello, sister," he said. Theresa forced herself to stand tall, one hand protectively on her stomach. "Marcus, you need to leave." "That's not very welcoming. I've ridden a long way to find you." His gaze dropped to her belly again. "I see you've been busy. Who's the father? Some cowboy who took advantage of you, my husband, and he'll be back any minute." "Your husband?" Marcus laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You're married, carrying some bastard's child, and you think that's better than coming home where you belong. I don't belong to you, Marcus. I never did. You're my sister, my blood. You had no right to run off like that. Do you have any idea what I went through when you disappeared?" "I thought you were dead. You should have." Theresa's voice was cold. "Because the person I used to be, your sister who trusted you, she is dead. You killed her when you started looking at me like property instead of family." Marcus's face darkened. He took a step toward her. "You're coming home with me. Right now." "No." Theresa pulled the pistol from her apron pocket and pointed it at him with steady hands. Harrison had made sure she knew how to use it. "You're going to get back on your horse and ride away. If you ever come near me or my family again, I will shoot you." "I mean that. You don't have the guts. Try me." They stared at each other for a long moment. Then, from behind Theresa, Harrison's voice cut through the tension like a knife. "She won't have to. I'll do it for her." Theresa risked a glance back and saw Harrison approaching from the barn, rifle in hand, Robert Richardson and 2 ranch hands behind him. They must have seen the strange horses from the road. Harrison came to stand beside Theresa, never lowering his rifle. "You must be Marcus. I've heard a lot about you, none of it good." "This is family business," Marcus said. "Theresa is my family now, which makes it my business." Harrison's voice was flat and dangerous. "You terrorized her. You drove her out into a blizzard where she nearly died. You have no rights here." "She's my sister. She's my wife, and the mother of my child. And if you don't get on your horse right now, you'll be dead before you can draw that gun you keep fingering." Marcus's companion spoke for the first time. "Marcus, let's go. This isn't worth dying over." "Shut up, Dalton." "No." Dalton edged his horse backward. "I agreed to help you find your sister, not get killed in a gunfight. This woman clearly doesn't want to go with you. Let it go." Marcus looked between Harrison and Theresa, his face twisted with rage and something that might have been pain. "You were supposed to take care of the ranch. It was supposed to be ours together. That's what Pa wanted." "Pa wanted us to be a family," Theresa said softly. "But you forgot what that means. I'm sorry for you, Marcus, I really am, but I'm not sorry I left." For just a moment, something human flickered in Marcus's eyes. Then it was gone, replaced by cold anger. He mounted his horse in one smooth motion. "You'll regret this," he said. The only thing I regret is not leaving sooner." Theresa lowered her pistol. "Goodbye, Marcus, don't come back." He wheeled his horse around and rode away, Dalton following. They watched until the riders disappeared over the hills. Only then did Theresa start shaking. Harrison immediately set down his rifle and pulled her into his arms. "It's all right," he murmured into her hair. "It's over." "You were so brave." "I thought I was going to faint," she admitted, her face pressed against his chest. "But you didn't. You stood up to him." Harrison pulled back to look at her face. "I'm so damn proud of you." Robert clapped Harrison on the shoulder. "You two all right?" "Yes, sir." "Thank you for coming. That's what neighbors do." Robert tipped his hat to Theresa. "You ever need anything, you just holler. That man comes back around, we'll be ready." But Marcus did not come back. As winter melted into spring, there was no sign of him. Theresa gradually stopped flinching at the sound of approaching horses. Her belly grew round and full. Harrison talked to it every night, telling their unborn child stories and making Theresa laugh. On April 28th, after a labor that lasted through the night and into the next afternoon, Theresa gave birth to a healthy baby boy. Harrison held his son for the first time and cried like a child himself. "He's perfect," he whispered. "He's absolutely perfect." They named him James, after Harrison's father. Little Jamie had his father's dark eyes and his mother's delicate features. He was a good baby, calm and happy, and both his parents were hopelessly in love with him from the first moment. Elizabeth visited often, bringing gifts and advice. Robert built Jamie a cradle that rocked smooth as glass. The ranch hands took turns stopping by to meet the newest member of their community, each one bringing small offerings. A hand-carved toy, a soft blanket, a bag of peppermint sticks for when he was old enough. That first summer with Jamie was the happiest time of Theresa's life. She would sit on the porch with her son while Harrison worked, singing to him, telling him stories. In the evenings, the three of them would sit together, Harrison holding Jamie while Theresa read aloud. They were building something beautiful, something that felt miraculous to Theresa when she thought about where she had been just 2 years ago. The years that followed were full and rich. The small ranch prospered. Harrison proved to have a gift for training horses, and soon people were coming from all over Wyoming to buy Porter-trained mounts. Theresa expanded her garden and started selling vegetables and preserves. They added 2 more rooms to the house. When Jamie was 3, Theresa gave birth to twin girls. They named them Margaret and Rose, and suddenly the house that had seemed so spacious felt wonderfully full. Harrison proved to be a devoted father, patient and playful, who never minded being climbed on by small children or having tea parties with his daughters. More children followed. Another son, Robert, named for their benefactor. Another daughter, Elizabeth. The house grew along with the family. Harrison and several hired hands added a second story, more bedrooms, a larger kitchen. The small ranch became a proper homestead, known throughout the territory for fine horses and a family that embodied the best of frontier life. Through it all, Theresa and Harrison's love never wavered. If anything, it grew stronger, deepened by shared challenges and joys. They still sat on the porch together in the evenings after the children were in bed, holding hands and watching the sunset. They still looked at each other across crowded rooms and smiled at private jokes. They still made time for each other, for stolen kisses in the barn and long conversations by the fire. When Jamie turned 10, old enough to understand, Theresa told him the story of how his parents met. He listened with wide eyes as she described walking through the snow for 7 days, how his father had found her and saved her life. "Were you scared?" Jamie asked. "Terrified," Theresa admitted. "But your father made me feel safe. He still does." "Good," Jamie said firmly. That's what fathers are supposed to do. Harrison, overhearing from the doorway, felt his heart swell with pride for his son. News reached them occasionally from Montana. Marcus had sold the ranch and moved east to Chicago or St. Louis, depending on who was telling the story. Either way, he was gone from their lives. Theresa felt a lingering sadness for the brother he might have been, but no regret for the choice she had made. Years turned into decades. Children grew and married, bringing grandchildren to fill the house with noise and laughter. The territory became a state. The wild frontier was gradually tamed, though pockets of wilderness remained. Harrison's hair turned gray, then white. Theresa developed laugh lines around her eyes and mouth that Harrison loved to trace with his fingertips. On a spring afternoon in 1907, 25 years after they first met, Theresa and Harrison sat on their porch watching their youngest granddaughter chase chickens in the yard. The house behind them was full of family visiting for Sunday dinner. Smoke rose from the chimney. Someone was playing the piano inside, slightly off-key but enthusiastic. "You ever think about what your life would have been like if you had kept walking that day?" Theresa asked. "If you had not stopped for me?" Harrison was quiet for a moment, considering. "Sometimes. But not with any real longing. This life, right here, is better than anything I could have imagined." He turned to look at her, his dark eyes still sharp despite his age. "You're the best thing that ever happened to me, Theresa Porter. Finding you in that snow was the greatest gift God ever gave me." Theresa leaned against his shoulder, fitting against him as perfectly as she had 25 years ago. "I walked through that snow thinking I was just trying to survive. I had no idea I was walking toward you, toward all of this. You think you would do it again? If you knew how hard it would be," in a heartbeat. She tilted her face up to kiss him softly. Every frozen step was worth it to get here. Inside, someone called that dinner was ready. Children's voices rose in excitement. But Harrison and Theresa sat for another moment, hands clasped, hearts full, watching the sun paint gold across the land they had built together. That evening, after the family had gone home and the house was quiet again, they walked together to the small cemetery on the hill behind their property. Several generations of Porters rested there now. At the very top of the hill, Harrison had placed a marker years ago. It was not a grave but a memorial, inscribed with simple words. "Here ends the journey. Here begins the life." Theresa read the words she had read 100 times before, and they still made her throat tight with emotion. Harrison put his arm around her waist. "I thought about what to put there for months," he said. "Wanted something that would tell the story, you know. About how you walked all that way, how we found each other." "It's perfect," Theresa said, "because that's exactly what happened. My old life ended in that snow. This one began when you found me." They stood together as darkness fell. Two people who had been forged into one through trials and love, watching stars emerge over the land they had made home. Below them, lights glowed warm in the windows of their house. Somewhere in the distance, one of Harrison's horses whinnied. A coyote called and was answered. The Wild West they had known was fading, becoming something gentler, something settled. But the love they had built would last. It would be carried forward in their children and grandchildren, in the stories told around winter fires, in the very stones of the house they had raised together. Theresa had walked through snow for 7 days to escape a nightmare. She had been found by a cowboy who gave her rest and safety, and eventually a love so profound it had rewritten every expectation she held about what life could be. As they walked back down the hill toward home, Harrison's hand firm and warm in hers, Theresa sent up a silent prayer of gratitude. For frozen feet that kept walking, for a kind man on a horse who stopped, for every moment, hard and beautiful, that had led her here. The house welcomed them back with warmth and light. Harrison held the door for her, as he had done every day of their marriage. Inside, a fire crackled in the hearth they had built together. On the mantel stood photographs of their children, their grandchildren, the sprawling, beautiful family they had created. Theresa moved through the familiar rooms, banking the fire, checking that doors were locked, all the small rituals of closing down a house for the night. Harrison came up behind her and wrapped his arms around her waist, his chin resting on her shoulder. "I love you," he murmured. "I love you too," she replied, as she had replied every single day since she became his wife. They climbed the stairs to their bedroom together. Through the window, moonlight silvered the landscape. Somewhere out there, perhaps, another lost soul was struggling through darkness toward salvation. Somewhere, another rescuer was riding through the night, not yet knowing that destiny waited in the snow. But here, in this house, in this room, there was only peace, only love, only the quiet joy of two people who had found each other against all odds and built something lasting from that miracle. Theresa fell asleep in Harrison's arms, as she had done thousands of times before. And as she drifted off, she thought about that girl who had stumbled through snowdrifts with frozen feet and a desperate heart. She wished she could go back and tell that girl what waited on the other side of her fear. She would tell her that the snow would end, that warmth was coming, that a dark-eyed cowboy would find her and offer not just shelter, but a love that would sustain her through every season of life that followed. She would tell her to keep walking, no matter how impossible it seemed, because at the end of that frozen journey waited everything worth having: a home, a family, a partner who would stand beside her through every storm, a love story written in survival and trust, and the kind of devotion that only deepens with time. But that girl could not hear her, lost as she was in the blizzard of her own desperate flight. So she had walked on faith alone, not knowing rescue was riding toward her, not knowing that 7 days of frozen hell would lead to 50 years of heaven. That was the magic of it, Theresa thought as sleep claimed her. Life's greatest gifts often came disguised as insurmountable obstacles. The trick was simply to keep walking, to refuse to lie down in the snow and surrender. To believe, even when belief seemed foolish, that something better waited ahead. She had walked through snow for a week to escape her brother. A cowboy had found her and let her rest. And in that rest, in that shelter, in that first moment of safety and warmth, a love had been born that would echo through generations. It was, she thought with her last conscious thought of the day, a pretty good story. The kind worth telling around fires on winter nights, when the snow fell thick and children wondered if spring would ever come. She would tell them yes. Yes, spring always comes. You just have to make it through the winter. You just have to keep walking until someone finds you. And if you are very, very lucky, that someone will offer not just temporary shelter, but a permanent home in their heart. Harrison's breathing deepened beside her, and she smiled in the darkness. 25 years, and he still held her every night like she might disappear if he let go. 25 years, and her heart still jumped when she heard his voice. Some things time only improved. Outside, a wind picked up, rattling the shutters gently. But inside, all was warm and safe and whole. The house Harrison built stood firm against the weather. The life they created together spread out in all directions, touching dozens of lives, creating ripples that would extend far into the future. Tomorrow there would be chores and work, small challenges and large joys. Their son Jamie would stop by with his wife and children. Elizabeth Richardson, now in her 70s but still sharp as a tack, would come for tea and gossip. Harrison would work with the new colt in the training pen while Theresa tended her garden. It was an ordinary life, in many ways. the kind of life lived by thousands of frontier families across the West. But it was also extraordinary because it was built on a foundation of a love that had survived impossible odds. Every ordinary moment was sanctified by that truth. Theresa shifted closer to Harrison in her sleep, and even unconscious, he tightened his arms around her, protecting her, cherishing her, loving her with every breath. In the morning they would wake together as they had done for 25 years. Harrison would kiss her forehead and call her beautiful, even though her hair was gray and her face lined. She would make coffee while he started the fire, and they would sit at the table they had built together, planning their day. It would be peaceful and sweet and utterly unremarkable. Just another day in a long string of days that made up a life. But underlying that ordinary peace would be the knowledge of what they had overcome to get here. The snow and the fear and the desperation. The courage it took to run and the kindness it took to stop. The leap of faith required to trust again, to love again, to believe that happiness was possible after trauma. They had taken those leaps together, and they had not fallen. Instead, they had flown. That was what Theresa would want people to remember. She thought in the fuzzy space between sleep and waking. Not just that she had survived, though survival was important, but that she had thrived. That from the ashes of her old life, she had built something beautiful and strong and true. With Harrison, always with Harrison, the cowboy who found her in the snow and gave her rest. The man who became her husband, her partner, her greatest love. The father of her children and the builder of her dreams. He was her home. Not this house as much as she loved it. Not this land, as beautiful as it was. Him. Harrison Porter, with his dark eyes and gentle hands and unshakable integrity. She had walked through snow for a week and found him waiting at the end of her journey. What were the odds? What divine providence had aligned their paths so perfectly? What cosmic forces had ensured that he would ride that particular road on that particular day, and that he would be the kind of man who would stop? Theresa did not know. She only knew that she was grateful beyond words for whatever twist of fate or act of God had brought them together. In the darkness, Harrison stirred and murmured her name, still mostly asleep. She whispered back that she was here, she was fine, everything was all right. He settled again, comforted. Even in sleep they took care of each other. Even in dreams they were together. It was enough. It was more than enough. It was everything. And when morning came, when sunlight streamed through the window and the rooster crowed and another day began, they would rise and meet it together. As they had met every challenge and celebrated every joy together. As they would continue to do until their final day. That was what it meant to be partners, to be lovers, to be family. That was what it meant when you walked through snow for a week to escape your brother, and a cowboy found you and let you rest, and then never asked you to leave.